Backyard, the boogie oogie. Divine Rise, Great Rising. Divine Rise, Great Rising. Blessed be to your day. May it be everything you require to create everything you desire. Y'all know how we do it around. You know how we do it on Thursdays, or you should get used to knowing how we do it on Thursdays. This that pregame. This the pregame approach. This our pregame going into Friday night. I wanted to get into the emotional variance as I get all this organized. All right, cool. Everything's organized. But yes, welcome to another beautiful Thursday. I get to wake up. I am in gratitude. I get to wake up. I get to do this work. It's a privilege for me to learn myself. It's an honor. It's a privilege for me to be able to learn myself, embrace myself, and become one. But I had a thought. Wealthy. But I had a thought when it comes to the emotional variations. If I were to ask you, like what I ask a lot of when I'm doing a shadow work, when I'm doing consultations, when I'm working with clients, when I'm doing readings, when I'm doing a consultation, one of the things that always comes up is the different variances or the different variances of ourselves. If I were to ask you, how many versions of yourself did you create when you were little? You remember, like, when we were little, you created a version of yourself when you were scared. You created the shy version of yourself. You created the angry version of yourself, the humble version of yourself. You created these identities based in protection, to protect yourself. So imagine every time you went through a certain experience, you made a concrete identity to protect you inside of that space. So the arguments that you always saw with your mother and your father, or the aspect of who raised you, you created a variant of yourself to protect you from that space. You created a variant of yourself. The one that was sitting there reading books all the time. The version of you that read the books, the version of you that did this, and then you just kept creating these different variances. All from the original elements. So now we think about the four elements: fire, water, earth, and air. And you created variances from that aspect of that point. You changing and you being scared, the aspects of us now being stuck in a space when they talking about, ooh, now there's a Delta variant, there's another variant of the COVID, and there's this, and this. That's you getting triggered by that. It's further letting you know, remember, because everything's working for you, not against you. That happening to you is to let you understand the experience of there's a variant of yourself that you have not, variances of yourself that you haven't ever connected. Have you ever heard of that? Think that thought process. You never, in every person's mind, in every example in your space, there is a different variation, even if the variation is slight. There is a different variation of you that deals with everything inside of your space. There is a different variation of yourself. Every time you go into a space and you react, you create a different variant to deal with that space. So now think about it. Now, since we thought about that, to make it simple, to simplify ourselves, how many variances of yourself how many variances of the identity or that projection or that clone of yourself did you create to deal with certain aspects of anger? Remember, every time you learn something, you create naturally from the aspects of not assessing, you created another variation of yourself in order to experience and or learn within that space. But since we were stuck in the mindset of that physical, we talked about that physical last night, and we're going to get deep into that on Friday with the provisional aspect. A lot of times we create these variations of ourselves Based on that original identity we create this variation of ourselves to sustain the provisions within that space, to continue to get something. But what if I went into a space and I wasn't looking for anything? What if you went into a space and you weren't going there to get something this time? What if you simply went in there for the experience? Yeah, exactly. Like, think about it. You have created multitude versions of yourself in order to sustain that aspect of that anger. So you have different variables and different variations of how well you gonna be able to take on anger. You have different variables and variations of yourself in order for you to take on the sadness, whatever wound it is. And that's the physical manifestation of your entire body. The fear of not existing. I asked my beloved the other day, I was like, when you think about Xerxes, the nigga from 300, could you imagine yourself being that sure of yourself? To the aptitude of understanding and being sure of everything that you did, and you can take on the consequence. She was like, I probably could. That's the scary part about you becoming the truest version of yourself. You'll create a variant for that provisional aspect to live in it a little bit, but you got to remember the root to it is how that continues to happen. So if I create an identity based out of fear, being shy, being humble, being angry, every other copy or every other variation of myself is going to be rooted in the aspects of the original anger. And until I deal with that anger on that root level, every time that I do something, it's going to send every receptor and every feeling that I feel. The only reason that it keeps coming back to me is it keeps going back to that root variant. As long as the anger is present at my score, I'll always have a reason to be angry. Here's my multiple reasons to be angry. As long as it's rooted at my core, my insecurity, my doubts in myself, that doubt that I learned, this learned aspect, as long as it's at my core, I'll always try to create a reason I always have a reason to doubt. And if I'm stuck on the physical plane of myself, then I'm naturally the one time where in one of my variations of myself, where I created a certain life for me, or I had an idea about a life and I created something in that space, I'm going to hold on to that and keep trying to manipulate that. But the problem is I need to have anger to manipulate that. I got to have the despair. I got to have the doubt. I got to have that one piece. This is when I always talk about, think about your job, and you got your job based on anger and survival, and then going down to that cellular level of yourself. Now you start to understand, you looking like, oh, that's why I did that all the time. That's why no matter what happens, a lot of times, you always go back to that root aspect of yourself. You always go back to that little kid sitting in the room waiting for somebody to say you can come out and eat. So now that identity, you split this identity up, and now you got multiple, and then this is when it becomes the soul ties. That's the same aspect. The altar is the extension, yeah. Your altar is that extension of you. It holds you in that one position, but it's that one position in which that now you are in one position to observe. You're in this one, you created this one space. You like creating that altar is for you to focus on that one space in order for you to become the ultimate observer of every one of the variations every one of those variations or the principles of thought, and you just wanted to experience all of those aspects. Like, I use an example. If somebody were to look at me, if somebody to spark up a conversation with people, I have over here, I have Lord Ganesh. Behind me, I have Buddha. Over here, I got my skull. I got myself at the crossroads. To make somebody spark up their thought process and make them, force them to think, I can be like, someone can be like, oh, you got Ganesh and you got Buddha. The first thing that I'll be able to say in a reaction, in response, to be like, no, that's Baphomet. They'll look at me and be like, no, that's not Baphomet, that's Ganesh. No, that's not Buddha, that's not Baphomet, that's Buddha. No, no. That can be Baphomet, that can be Ganesh. That can be Ganesh, Baphomet, Buddha, Pan, whatever principle and focus into it. That's my one focal point. But how I experience this in the multitudes of my life, how I experience this when I think about obstacles, that's what I put up front to understand obstacles. So now in myself, every obstacle, and when I'm talking about removing these obstacles, now I got to go back and think about all the variations of myself in order to maintain or come into this true aspect of this energy to myself. I gotta fear no longer existing. That fear of no longer existing. But if I do this, then this goes away, and if I do this, then that goes away. If I don't talk to somebody if I don't talk to motherfuckers for a week, then people are gonna start thinking that I'm being antisocial. Am I really antisocial? No, because I really talk to people. But no, I really don't talk to people because I only talk to people within a certain comfort zone. So am I really antisocial? People call me antisocial. So now I created that variant of myself to make me experience, am I really antisocial? And then you just continuously create these different variations of yourself and you get to see it. That's how you're connecting to everything inside of your space. Remember, atoms don't touch. That's how you get to see yourself. So now you got a friend. Now you meet somebody else. You meet some people. And they're close-knit and they're not really going out type people, and you love that feeling. Yes, those are your personalities. The deity, like when you look, if you ever go look at a deity, like use an example. If I grab this book right here, we don't get deep into this tomorrow. If I grab this book right here and I flip to, let's flip to somebody. The first one that pops up. And I go through this book. Let's look, for example. And I see Madame Bridget. Okay, also known as Mama Bridget, La Grande, Brigitte, Creole, Mother Bridget, or in New Orleans. Origin in Haiti. Everything that's in this space, this is a different focal point. This is a different focal point or personality that I'm going to create a different variation for. This is when, because I'm looking at it from a singular position, I still think that I'm in a singular space, because like, if I'm not looking at myself in, I can be in multiple places. I can be in multiple places. I can't fathom that because I can't see it. I can't touch it. I can't feel it. But you're already doing it. We're already doing it. The person you are at, for example, the person you are at your job is 9 times out of 10 not the person that you are at your house. The person that your mother knows you as, or your father knows you as, or your best friend knows you as, or your sister, even your sister, brother, your family, each one of your family members knows you as even if it's a slight variation, they know you as something different. They know you as you're something totally different to each person. You're something totally different. Because based on their experiences of their path, they're going to see you a certain way based on things that they have not yet synthesized inside of themselves. Just like in the same thing, things that I have not seen inside of myself. This is when you go between, do I want to continue? Like the famous quote of Dark Knight, either you die being the hero or you see yourself become the villain. That emotional variation is seeing yourself become the villain. Because until you become the villain, that's why you connect to everything, because you're naturally connecting. And then from the emotional standpoint of us not really synthesizing it, when you look at that, I always talk about this, we're gonna get deeper towards Friday, but think about the consciousness community. The conscious community is still in the sense of all these different variations, similar to when you look at the Christian community or the religious community. They just shifted it up because that next process is dealing with how you created all those variations. Being able to simplify yourself down back into one. That one thought. You can't even imagine yourself being half the thoughts that you had. I could never imagine myself doing that, or never imagine myself doing that, or never imagine myself doing that. Why not? Apparently you have, because you had the thought once in a while. You've had the thought. Remember, you're coming back to that androgynous state. You don't need an identity to become androgynous. You are whatever it's the ultimate acceptance is being able to accept how everybody's going to see you. Let them think what they're going to think. There's people right now that think I am an asshole. Okay. There's motherfuckers that think that I am that think that, yo, I'm I give information and I'm open. Okay. I see all of them in the same exact way. They're learning. Because if I do not see them as they're learning or their aptitude to learn or their level of where they need to learn, then I stop seeing myself as learning. Is whenever that's how the identity maintains itself. Your identity's strength is your identity's weakness is going to be your authentic self strength in that aptitude for the emotional aspect. So if my identity of me being hard, me being coarse, me being petty, me being calculated, me being one of these aspects, that means the exact opposite of that is what is going to be the weakness. Yeah, because that's the key. Like that overthinking process, that's the overthinking keeps you within the complexity. You try to keep everything complex. It got to be a different reason, but what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And what about it? Either like here's a great way to think about it. What about it? I can't see it if I'm in it. A lot of things that I had to really realize, from a relationship to the job to a lot of things that I was doing, I was stuck on the feeling to activate the thought. So if I was in that space, I could control it. I had power over it. I can control it. I can control my existence. So now I got to go back and think about all the thoughts that I've ever had. All them thoughts that I created all these different variations for what people think about me. But I lost sight of thinking about myself. In the physical, like I've talked about this before, in the physical state, in the humanity, in the physical attachments, in the material, to be selfish is horrible. To be selfish is against all humanity. But in reality, in my human state, I'm selfless. I have no body. Therefore, the only way that I connect to everything inside of my space is based on their perception of creating that body. So now that's me going through the experiences. So whether I go to the store and there's an old man that got some shit to say to me and got some shit to say to me about how I'm dressed or what I look like or whatever, I'm going through that thought in my mind and I interact with them. I interact with this motherfucker. And to me, be super honest, I had an idea about, I don't know what it looked like to be old. So that's an example of me being old. Me being argumentative. That's an example of me being old. Just like in the example of me being when I was younger. Like, you think about everything you do based in this timeline of time, you think about the years. Everything about you looking at music, the way you listen to music, these young boys don't know this, these old girls don't know this. Neither. All of these aspects are experiences of you. You are experiencing yourself at a rapid rate. If I learn to let go and learn to assess myself, my original variances, then I can start seeing the connections in everything that I'm in. I'm either connected or I'm attached. If I go out in the aspect of attachment, that means I need something there. I need to learn that lesson. It's like, take the aspect of a predestination complex. Think about how you were taught, what you saw. Not for most of us, it was a thought process. For most of us, it was a thought process of us sitting in a space. You get a job, you get married, you have some kids. They get old enough. Then you go on. Then you can start living your life. So staying in that mindset based on survival, based on the lack mindset, now that's what you always want to go get. It's like multiple times I've had multiple clients that I've dealt with, and the story, most of the stories are exactly the damn same. Their dad had a whole different life. Their dad had a whole different family, and they thought they can just keep starting it over. So now you got to look at your life, and you keep doing the same thing because you're only a variation of that. That's a variation of you. But since that hatred or lack of understanding of myself, or i.e. that as my example, now I got to do it. I got to create a variation that can combat against that. So I got to create an identity that go against that. So now I don't want to do that no more. It isn't working. And then when everything starts, this is whenever you see the aspects of chaos. We're going to get deep into this on Friday, tomorrow. But when we look at the aspects of the chaos that happens in your life, that's bringing the reset. The things we try to hold on to in that physical aspect, based on that reset, that's what's killing you. Holding on to that variation of yourself. Just so you can say I did it. Just because so you can say I was there. I was there in 98. I was there in 62. Okay. What lesson did you learn? It does me no good to look at a variation of myself if I'm not learning myself. So now as you start to integrate your shadows, as 4 became 8, and 8 came down into 2, and 2 became 1. Now I know all of these different variations are of me. Now I can use each one of these variations in the most efficient manner. It's not about shutting off the emotion. It's not about shutting off the emotion or the feeling or the thought so you can activate. It's so you're able to move into every space as one and now your perspective is of that one singular. Easy. If I asked you a simple question, when is the last time that you spoke to your inner child? When's the last time you spoke to your inner child? When the last time you had a conversation, you gave yourself a play date with your inner child? When the last time you watched a cartoon? When's the last time you ate something that you haven't eaten since you were like 5 or 6? The simplicity of that question, I remember asking myself a question that was similar aspects of that question. And then when I asked myself that question and I really thought about it, everything that I created that took me away from that, that's what came up. Remember, as soon as you speak it, the things, you get what you need. Yeah. So like, think about that aspect. If you ain't talked to your inner child let's say you ain't talked to your inner child in 10 years. Let's say, for example, I ain't talked to my inner child in 10 years. I'm 36 now. I ain't talked to my inner child in 10 years. That means I ain't talked to my inner child since I was 6. That means I left my inner child to deal with every variation by itself. So look at the physical examples of you leaving your inner child to deal with those variations by themselves. Whether it was you wanted to be the best at sports to get that approval, whether it was the neglection that you felt, that wound, that's how you created that variant. So that variant became another altar. So you created an altar of yourself that went against being neglected. So now inside of your space, as long as nobody's being neglected, you feel okay, you feel good, you happy, you feel like you've done something. But the moment that you cannot do something for somebody else, that root starts to show. That anger that you felt based on you being neglected as an in that inner child state, it's already been there. But in that split, as you start splitting yourself, you made everything in a state of duality. So everything has that positive and a negative. So now this relationship, it has all of the negatives components of yourself, and it has all of the positive components of yourself. But since I'm focused on the negative of my neglect, I'm trying to make everything positive. So now I create this altar that's based into the positive. But now the principles of this altar, they're separated in themselves because it must reflect me. This is when you take another simple thought. You know, you've had a thought about, you sat there and you looked at a phone, you looked at that bill and you were like, you looked at that bill at the restaurant and that shit said $362 and you were like, yep. You're going to war with them. Remember, you created those aspects to protect yourself. Everything that you created was to protect yourself. You created multiple avenues to protect your energy, to protect yourself. While you were going through that incubation phase, while you were going through these phases. So you're naturally going to reach a point to where the chaos gets too heavy. For some of us, that's the aspect of your awakening. So when you think consciousness, you're simply aware. I'm aware of my space. I'm aware I'm inside of this space. But now I have to have self-awareness of how I created the space. That means I got to take the acceptance of what I created inside of my space. This is a variation that I left running on autopilot. I must accept that I got to turn that shit off because I don't need it anymore. Why? But then in order for me to understand why, to turn it off, I got to understand why I created it inside of the first place. Why did I feel the need to ultimately be this person for so long? That's the despair. That's the feeling lost. That's the frustration. That's the overwhelm. That's when all the feelings start to come up because now you're assessing this shadow. So like in sessions, when we're assessing and bringing that shadow to the present and that trigger comes up, the trigger's forcing me to be emotionally present. See, that identity is perfected because it's based on emotional relevance. This altar of myself is perfected because it's based on the emotional relevance. I created that because I was angry, just like I created that because I was happy. Yes. You created the triggers. You created all of the triggers. You set this up before you even got to the space. This is when we think about the different parallels of thought. When you think about the parallels of thought, string theory, you start looking at all these theories, all of those are aspects that simplify into, oh, I made that happen. Because that's the ownership. It's not about the good or bad. It's about me owning what I did. There's shit that I did when I was little that by definition, for some people, like, nigga, you were an evil person. And I have to accept that. Just like there's things that I did there's things that I did that were evil based on the intentions of me doing something good. Just like there were things that I did that were perceived good that I did with ill intentions. I did that. You're okay. That's what this is here for. If you're not asking questions, then that means you're not opening yourself up to the aptitude of learning yourself. That's what it is. Like, this is that space for that. If at the end of a lecture, the end of a consultation, anything that you're doing, you don't have questions, then you didn't learn anything. That's how we have to look at it. It's like, that's why you created the variations, to learn some shit. But then you got caught up in the physical aspect, and we're like, well, I got a nice house, and I got a job, and I got a big booty bitch. Exactly. And also, because if you don't ask every question, I remember Bobby Hemmett taught me, and that was one of the greatest things, was like, if you're sitting inside that space and somebody doesn't know how to formulate that question, every question is an answer for somebody else. Your question is an answer for somebody else. That's the connection. If you ask me a question and I give you an answer, there's gonna be 4 or 5 people later on down the line looking at this live and be like, damn, he answered my question. Shit. That's the connection. See, when we're stuck in attachment, you don't want to ask questions. When you're stuck in that emotional variance of yourself, you don't want to ask no damn questions. You afraid if you ask the wrong question, somebody gonna look at you like you crazy as shit. If like the people that know me, the motherfuckers that have known me forever, have known me, they've known I've never been here. And it took over from the time that most people met me to the ones that fell off and the ones that are back in, and everybody's back in. I'm more and more, every time anybody that met me, that understood me at a certain point, that saw me as something weird, that pain, yeah, that's what it's for. This shit, like, we think that we got mad because of the trauma and we trying to run away from it, but that's what's gonna make you ask the question. That's what's gonna stimulate the thought. That's what's gonna force you out of that's what's gonna force you to be emotionally present. That's what's gonna force me to let me deal with myself real quick. Because ultimately that's what you're not doing. If you look at your life and if your life is in shambles, there's something that you are not dealing with. The most simplest form of the answer. That's the breaking point. There's something that you're not dealing with. And then the longer that you avoid that aspect, that thought, you keep creating these different variances of yourself to see yourself ultimately inside of a space being better. See, if I get some of that, if I go to the buffet table and I know at 4:30 at the buffet table they gonna put out the fresh crab legs, I know I gotta get there at this time to go get some of them fresh crab legs. If I don't get them fresh crab legs, I'm gonna be mad. That's how you set up your space. If I don't get this, then this is gonna happen. And you set it up with that worst case scenario in your own mind. And you just keep setting it up. You just keep setting yourself up. So that identity of you can live. Yeah. That identity of you lives now inside of that space. And all of it's based on what we're going to be getting into tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be getting into the provisional instinct and how we rationalize ourselves instead of dealing with the byproduct of our shadow, we try to rationalize it to keep ourselves maintaining inside of that space. It's been getting into tomorrow night. Y'all know throughout, it's time to let's deal with our shadow. You keep making you made imaginary friends since you were 5. You made imaginary friends since you were little, and then you lost the ability, but you keep doing it. Now I got real friends. No, they're the same imaginary friends you created. Now you got real friends. They're the imaginary friends that you created already when you were little. All of those imaginary aspects of yourself that you created when you were little, that's what you created in that space. And then when you leveled up or when you got to that space, you did it again. And that's what you just been doing. You've been attracting the same thing because you're still on that same space. Now it's time to take that shift. But yeah, 8 p.m. Exactly. If y'all looking at Boobay, this is one person that if I say was the exact reflection point of the similarities of our lives and like how we had to hold ourselves into a certain position, and seeing the aspects of that aptitude of our growth with ourselves changed exponentially. She was one of my first public clients, and the work that the growth into the work that she's been doing has been fucking amazing. That's what yeah. We think that being strong, I'm gonna put it like this. When we become one, as you're becoming one with yourself, you understand that strength and weakness are the same thing. Strength and weakness are the same thing. Two sides of the same coin. Two sides of the same coin. You understand that painful moment is the same thing as the most pleasurable moment. They're the same thing. But you got to see yourself become one to understand. You got to strip away in order to become that very one to yourself. And then everything falls into place. It's okay. You have to understand that is what's going to change. That's what's going to help you evolve. That's the evolution point. You're going to have, I talked about it last night. I had six in total dark nights of my soul, and I had 27 different variations that helped me get to that point. Yeah. Matter of fact, I'm gonna do a collective reading since I like the energy right now. Said fuck it. I'm gonna do a little collective real quick. Let's see what the energy's talking about real quick. But yeah, remember 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You know we gonna get deeper into this on Friday. Ten of Pentacles. Ten of Pentacles is that first card. Two of Swords is that second card. Represents the conflicts. The original grounding or the original tethers is sewn in the Ten of Pentacles. When we look at the Ten of Pentacles, that's the aspects of the original grounding or what we were tethered to. Seeing that energy in that space with that Two of Swords, the Two of Swords represents the conflict in between the two spaces. Which way do I go now? It doesn't. I'm gonna give you a super key that I learned. It don't matter which path you choose, as long as you're willing to observe the other. Whichever path you choose, the other path is gonna be you observe. The other path is there for you to observe. No problem. That's the other one you have to observe. That goes into that Five of Cups. That Five of Cups. What represents that loss. A lot of times us moving forward with ourselves, we fear what we're about to lose. You fear that you about to lose, you fear you about to lose some shit. But in order for me to see, remember I've talked about that mask before, in order to see what I am, I must become separated from certain things. So the things that I'm the most attached to, I must be separated from in order for me to understand what it is, to see the path in between it. I have to see the path of what it was, how I was connected to it. What emotional strands? Was it anger? Was it sadness? Was it jealousy? Was it doubt? What connected me to that space? The more and more that I sit in that separation, and I sit in that fear, and I sit in this emotion, vibrate like a motherfucker right now, and I sit in this emotion, the more that I'm able to understand this emotion. I have to trust the process. The longer that I sit in this emotion, the longer that I sit inside of this emotion and I allow myself to feel it, I allow this shit to come up, the weaker my body, the weaker I become, the weaker that identity becomes. But the stronger I become into myself. I'm breaking away from survival. Exactly, yeah. Breaking away from survival. I'm breaking away from this struggle narrative. I'm breaking away from these narratives that I thought that I dealt with. Remember, we think that we deal with things, but it's really you just created another variant in yourself. Which leads into that aspect of the Six of Swords. The Six of Swords represents the aspects of that earned success. You go between my losses and what I gained. Whether it's a gain or a loss, they're both lessons. In what I lost, what was my lesson? And what I gained, what was my lesson? That's what I take forward. Because I did it before, but now I can make it more efficient. How do I make it more efficient? I want efficiency. I'd rather do it. I'd rather put it in a position of me doing it correctly. As Rick Ross said, I don't care if it take however many years. Time don't really matter to me as long as I'm doing it in the most efficient way possible. In the truth of myself. I'm trusting that path. And that final card goes into that Knight of Pentacles. Moving forward into that new grounds. It requires the loss. It requires the assessment. Because without it, what am I doing? I can do 550 things in one day. I can do 550 things in one day. I can do 550 things in one day. But if there's no rhyme or if there's no connection to it, then I'll lose it I'll lose it when I go to sleep. I'll be afraid to lose something when I go to sleep. Every time you go to sleep, you reincarnate and come back. You come back a little bit. You come back a little bit and less you. And to maintain you, we got taught I gotta look at my phone first. I gotta do this first. I gotta put my identity on. I gotta put my face on. I gotta face the day like this. What if I stop fearing how I face the day? What if I get to realize that I'm in gratitude for how I face the day? It's time to remove that provisional instinct. And that's what we're going to get into tomorrow night. What if I say fuck it in a true sense and say I need to step away? What if I step the fuck away? What if I did do it? What would it look like? You can create that land. You can create that while you meditate. Imagine yourself doing some shit like that's what meditation is for. Until you master creating a scenario. Once I learned how to master creating them scenarios, because the first time when I was removing these scenarios out of myself, that's when the doubt would come up, the insecurity, the anxiousness, the overthinking. But I learned how to pause the moment. And that's one of the things that I teach is pausing the moment, accepting it, looking at it, and being able to say that was only based on the amount of information that I had at that time. I didn't know better. I know something now. Let me put that in there instead of this. Thank you. Until I got to the point of saying thank you. So then in the physical world, that's when I started saying thank you. So then I got to a point to where nonchalant as fuck. If something comes up, there's only going to be a handful of answers. Either I can't do it, and then why, and now they need to reassess the why, or I can do it, and this is why. Either way, it's coming from the truth of myself. If someone comes to me like, hey, let me get this, I remember trying to over-explain myself or try to make some grand scheme of reason because I was searching for I needed the attachment. That doubt came up, that perception of them. They're gonna think that I'm this. They're gonna think that regardless. If that one variation of you, it's gonna be another variation. So let them think what they think. What matters is how does it bother me? I learned to go past reaction. I'm gonna close it out with that. Remember, comfort is simply reaction. If I can react to it, it's letting me know the weakness in my comfort zone. If I can react to it, it's showing me the weakened point in my comfort zone. It's showing me my way out. Remember, everything down here is working for you. It's not working against you, it's working for you. But you got to get to that point to understand how it's working for you. I desire you to be the fucking best. I desire you to be the fucking best. Because that's what I desire of myself. Let's be fucking great. I love you. We love us. I'll see y'all on Friday. I'll see all y'all on Friday. Peace.